Hello, it's John Lopez, and today we're continuing our series on dreams in the Bible. And as we get here now, I'm kind of skipping other. There's certain things in Genesis that we've reached up to now. I think now we're going to be starting in the chapter 37 of Genesis. There are things that they look like they could be dreams, like for instance, at one point Abraham is put into a deep sleep, and then it describes a vision that he sees, but it doesn't say it's a dream. So I just we didn't necessarily look at it, but we can all you can look at that in your own time. I think sometimes if you were to just read through the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, what you would find is that over and over and over again that dreams are mentioned again and again as a way that God communicates to his people. And again, and I covered this in other videos, I don't believe that all dreams are from God. I don't think that um, every time that you have some kind of dream in the middle of the night that it's some kind of coded message from God. Sometimes there are other sources for dreams, but if we're not paying attention, we could easily dismiss them. And Job says that God may speak in one way or in another, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls upon men, then he seals their instruction. And if we're just dismissing our dreams, then we could potentially miss something that he is trying to say to us. And we have an opportunity for God to speak to us while we're sleeping. And since we spend about a third of our life asleep, that's that's a pretty good deal, especially. Um, and so as we start to look at chapter 37, what we get to is Joseph um, in the Old Testament. So there's a Joseph in the New Testament. He's the stepfather of Jesus. Um, he's also a dreamer. So both Josephs in the Bible are dreamers, and they're given dreams to guide them and direct them. Uh, and one of the things that's kind of exciting as I get to the dreams of Joseph, and dream Joseph also interprets dreams for other people, is that these dreams are more symbolic. So they're more into they're people call them, like, the messages are indirect messages. So they show up in pictures and in parables or in a story form in their dream, and so they require some level of interpreting in order to understand and gain the benefit from the message. Whereas you get very plain and direct dreams, like for instance, Abimelech, God appears in his dream and says, "You're a dead man and you need to return that man's wife, or I'm going to kill you and all yours." And so that's a very clear, direct dream, not one that I would want to get necessarily, but those are very clear and direct dreams, so that you don't really need to wake up and go, "Wow, I wonder what that means. Like, what could that be possibly symbolic of?" And so we can make the mistake of thinking that something that is one way or the other, and sometimes it's a little bit of both. And actually, I thought to myself, every time God spoke to Jacob, it was always very direct. But actually, when I looked at the story of Jacob's ladder, the stairway that went up to heaven, there is actually an element of symbolic, like an image there of the stairway that reaches, that it says it's standing on the earth, but its top is in heaven. And the Hebrew word for top is its head. So it's kind of, it gives you this picture of a stairway that's standing on the earth, but its head is in heaven. And he's hearing the voice of God speak to him, and he's seeing the angels coming down and going up. And angel, literally in Hebrew, it means messenger. So messengers are coming down and messages are going up. And so with that, there is an element of a symbolic imagery in the dream, and also the fact that it's used. This stairway is like the stairway you would see on Middle Eastern ziggurats, where there was a temple on top, where the closest place to heaven, and that's where God was supposed to dwell, or the God was to dwell. And then you would basically take that stairway, and that was your pathway to communicate to God and to interact with God and to fellowship with God. And so Jacob probably, I'm assuming that he may have understood immediately the significance of that particular kind of stairway. So, but then when we get to Joseph, it seems as though all the dreams that either he has, the two dreams that he has, and then also the dreams that he hears other people tell him and he interprets them for them, they're all very symbolic, highly symbolic, almost like they're like parables, they're like stories, and they actually convey a message in a symbolic form. And and as I read, and I was kind of preparing. I watched some videos and did some reading about Joseph and the dreams that he had. And one of the things that happens, I was actually listening to this one preacher on YouTube, and he said that sometimes people would come to him and they'd say, "Oh, I had this dream," and then they'd tell him this elaborate dream, and then they'd say, "I think it's from God, but I don't know what it means." And he said, "Well, if you don't know what it means, that it's probably not from God." And I was like, keep reading the Bible, buddy, because you get dreams, like, for instance, the dreams that were given to Pharaoh. He did not understand them. He gave them to all of his counselors. He says, like, what do these dreams mean? And they're all like, we don't know. So he ends up finding Joseph because he had heard that Joseph had the ability to interpret dreams. And then Joseph gives him the meaning of the dream. It actually ends up happening just like he said it was going to happen, based on his interpretation. So his interpretation was proven right. So in this particular case, what we're going to look at is the story of Joseph. And the story of Joseph is it's pretty cool. I think it's a literal historical story about a person, and yet I also think that woven within this story, like many Bible stories, it's almost like they themselves are like a parable of sorts. And so, like, for instance, when the rabbis would look at the different prophecies concerning Messiah, and Joseph is kind of like a type of Christ, so like as David was a type of Christ. And so they would they would look at these prophecies regarding Christ, the Messiah, when he comes, uh, and they'd find this group of prophecies that indicated that he was going to be rejected by his brothers and that he was going to suffer uh, humiliation and shame. And then they'd find these other prophecies that indicated that Messiah was going to come and he was going to conquer the enemies of Israel, and he was going to establish a kingdom on the earth. And they looked at these two sets of prophecies and they said to themselves, how can these both be the same person? So what they did, interestingly, is that they decided that there was actually two messiahs. There was a Messiah ben Joseph, who was the suffering Messiah, and there was the Messiah ben David, who is the conquering and ruling Messiah. Interestingly, Jesus is actually called in the New Testament the son of the carpenter. He's referred to as the son of Joseph. And in the first coming, he is the one who is betrayed by his brothers. He's sold for silver and he's handed over to Gentiles. And he ends up, so like it's not a perfect parallel, but you can kind of see part of where we're going here with this. Although I think that Messiah ben David and Messiah ben Joseph are the same person in Jesus. It's just the first coming and the second coming. And what Stephen says when he's about to make his final speech that would enrage the Sanhedrin and all of the Jewish people who were listening to him to inspire them to stone him to death. He says he starts off telling the story of the patriarchs and how they're traveling, and he says that Joseph goes down to Egypt and that he becomes ruler over all of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh, and that he's revealed to his brothers the second time. So his brothers actually go down twice, and he actually, the first time they go and see him as ruler, they don't recognize him. They don't even know it's him. And then the second time, he reveals himself to them. And I think I even see that as almost highly symbolic, or it tells the story that the first time Christ came, they didn't even recognize him, and the second time they do, and he reveals himself to them. But Joseph is a really neat character. Also, like I think I had mentioned in my last teaching, like I mentioned a dream I had that I went to church at this place, and I had a long sleeve tie dye T-shirt on and jeans. And the pastor in my dream, the leader of this particular group, didn't like it. And then it kind of goes on later in the second part of the dream where I see things he doesn't want me to see, and I think that's part of the reason why he didn't. Anyways, but I didn't really explain is that whenever it seems like tie dyes show up in my dreams, it seems to me like it's speaking of uh, me being a dreamer. Um, and it also speaks of the grace and favor of God. And strangely, because I bought these T-shirts from these hippies that used to sell them at the farmers market, it kind of almost like it's also associated, like tie dyes are kind of associated with like someone who is maybe in an altered state of consciousness, seeing things that other people don't see. Um, that's that's not what they mean in my dream, but in my dream, I think that they kind of the tie dyes kind of reappear, and it speaks to me about being the fact that I'm a dreamer and that I see things in dreams. So, so here we go. Let's go to chapter 37, and it says also Jacob's name before this was changed to Israel. God actually changes his name to Israel. Israel means wrestles with God. And so you'll actually find sometimes in the text that Israel and Jacob are used interchangeably. They keep kind of they sometimes they switch back and forth. Uh, and later on in the Bible, it does the same thing, referring to the nation of Israel, but also sometimes it'll refer to Jacob, referring to the nation of Israel, because it was his 12 sons that make up the 12 tribes. And his favorite wife, Rachel, had two sons, and that was Joseph and Benjamin. And she died when she gave birth to Benjamin. Benjamin she named him son Benoni, which means son of my suffering, but Jacob changed his name to Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. And so he also, like, that even kind of speaks of Christ, that he starts off as the son of my suffering, but then he becomes the son of my right hand. And so, like, again, it's kind of woven into the story. I don't think that they saw it at the time, but we can see it as we read through the Bible, that he works and speaks in history, and there's patterns that kind of reemerge over and over and over again. And so with that, one of his brother, so there's the younger brother, but then, so it says now, start in verse 1 of chapter 37. Now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. And this is the history of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah. Those are like his two stepmothers' children. So they're half brothers. His father's wives and Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. So the story starts off, and Joseph goes and brings, like, basically tells on his brothers, and they kind of get in trouble. Verse 3. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. Also, he made him a tunic of many colors. Part of the reason why tie-dyes would be symbolic to me in my dream of um, of the coat of many colors that was given to Joseph. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So let's just read the dream, and then he tells another dream. So we'll just go through the dreams. So he said to them, "Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were." He's telling this to his brothers, we being his brothers. I'm assuming also that probably not his brother Benjamin, because he would have been much smaller at the time. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright, and indeed your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf. So a sheaf would be like a collection of wheat, and then you kind of tie it so it's kind of like a bundle of wheat. So they're collecting, they're harvesting the wheat, and then they bind them in bundles. And in the dream, he says, "My sheaf rose up, and then yours stood up and bowed down to mine." And his brothers said to him, "Have you shall you indeed reign over us, or shall you indeed have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Um, it seems pretty clear that Joseph's brothers understood what this dream meant, or at least they interpreted it as is that Joseph would rise to a position of prominence above them, and that they would submit themselves to him. And I'd say that it seems like that would be the meaning of the dream. And it made them really mad. Maybe a note for us is that maybe when we get certain things in dreams, especially when they involve other people, we may want to consider not telling them. Uh, they might not respond very well, especially if it puts them in a not so flattering light. It didn't really matter. This is actually all part of the plan when you read the whole story. So him telling this dream and this next dream to his brothers actually kind of sets in motion and triggers all the events that will bring about the dream actually coming true. So in verse 9 it says, "Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, 'Look, I have dreamed another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me.' So he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, 'What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?' And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind." So we also would say, look at this particular dream. In this particular dream, there's the sun, the moon, and 11 stars. it does seem like it's almost, at least the way that they're understanding it, is though this has something to do with the family and Joseph being risen to a place of prominence where even the heads of the family, the sun and the moon, are actually going to bow down to him. And the fact that there's 11 stars is significant because Joseph has 11 brothers. And so that's important for us in the sense that when we get a dream, there are certain things that have a particular association for us. I think that we need to recognize that when we're getting a dream, that the dream is trying to tell us something, or it could be trying to tell us something um, from God, but it's definitely trying to tell us something, whether it's you're worrying about this too much um, or something along those lines. But so the number 11 could mean something to one person where it would mean something different to someone else. If you have 11 brothers, then 11 might speak to you specifically about your brothers. On the other hand, like there's other places in the Bible when numbers are used, there's different people who have different numbers that they associate with different things. And I think that the dream could be very personal in nature. Also, it could be more, maybe more, even more universal. There's certain numbers, like I have a book, it's called Number in Scripture, and you can kind of look up different numbers and you can see that numbers repeat themselves in different patterns in the Bible in the sense that they seem to be associated with certain things. For instance, man was created on the sixth day. Uh, it becomes the number associated with man. Uh, and so, like, three is a number that's associated with divinity. And so, when you have, like, say, in the book of Revelation, you have the Antichrist who proclaims himself to be God, his number is 666. So, it's man becoming God or exalting himself to God. I have fives or combinations of fives show up in my dreams sometimes, and they speak to me of grace. I had a dream in one case where a friend of mine had died suddenly. Nobody even knew he was sick. He didn't even know he was sick. He just died, and I was really upset about it. And he was a really good friend of mine. I had spent a lot of time having a lot of fun with him, hanging out when I was younger. Like we just, in my 30s, like me and him were really good friends. We just had a lot of fun together. A lot. Then went to go to parks and do kinds of. We did things together, and we had a lot of fun. He was pretty important to me, and I hadn't talked to him a lot during the whole COVID shutdown, and then afterwards, for a long time I just kind of got out of touch with him. And then, like right before he died, he called me like a month before, and he started calling me, and we started talking almost every day for a month, and then he died. And I knew I had led him to Christ. He'd come to pray to receive Christ as a result of my interactions with him. I when my conversation during that month, I knew he was reading his Bible. He was listening to the Bible. He was a truck driver. He he was going to church with his wife. He and his wife were very devout, and they believed in God. That he prayed. He was. It seemed to me like he was doing quite well as far as spiritually. But when he died, I was kind of shocked, and I began to feel a little disturbed. And I said to myself, and I said to God, I don't know, did I share the gospel the right way with him? Did I miss anything? Like, is he going to be okay? And I basically said, God, could you just, and I knew he would, I said in a dream, I said, could you just show me Like some way, somehow, let me know he's in heaven. I just want to know. I was pretty sure he was, I mean, based on my conversations. And then I ended up having this dream where um, I'm at the beach with a friend of mine, and we were playing in the water and just having a great time. And we hear a voice, somebody off to the side says, "It's almost time to go." And so both of us start getting out of the water. And as we're getting out of the water, he looks down and he starts seeing, he looks down and he sees, like, it looks like somebody dropped a handful of silver coins. And he looked down at the coins and he starts going under the water to get them up. And then he's like, "Come on, help me. There's more." And so I went down and he went under the surface and he found there was like a giant silver nickel that was like this big and it was really thick. And there was like there were stacks of them underneath the surface of the sand. And so we started digging them out and we're both digging them out. And then the dream ended. Like he found it first and then I found it after. And when I woke up, I wrote the dream down. And at first, I kind of interpreted it as more primarily about me. I know that silver sometimes in the Bible is usually associated with redemption, and that 5 is the number of grace. And then I realized, because the voice said, "It's almost time to go." And then we started to get out of the water and end our playtime together. And then right before he got out, he found the treasure. And then I found it. Then I'm helping him and I find the treasure. And as I'm writing out the dream, as I woke up, I felt like the Lord was just speaking to me that your friend just found the treasure before you did. And that there was more grace than you thought there was going to be. And so God is gracious, God is merciful, and there's more grace available to us than I think we even know. So either way, with these stories, he so here's the first 2 dreams that he has. His brothers really, they understand it immediately. Maybe it's because in this particular family they talked about dreams a lot. I don't know, but it seems as though they did understand what these dreams meant, and they didn't like it. The fact that Joseph was Dad's favorite probably didn't help. The fact that he was snitching on him and telling on him when they were doing bad stuff probably, I'm sure, didn't help either. And so the story kind of goes on, and just do it like. So eventually, his father sends him to go and check on his brothers again. And when they see him, uh, then they said to one another, "Look, this dreamer is coming. Come, therefore, let us kill him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams." And so then Reuben's like, "No, no, no, don't kill him." Reuben's the oldest brother. He's like, "No, no, no, don't kill him." And he's thinking, I could rescue him later. I can return him to his dad. It'll all be good. So they decide to throw him in a pit. Um, then at one point they see some slave traders that are traveling on their way to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers after he sees them, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." And his brothers listened to him. So they end up selling him as a slave into Egypt. And when he gets there, he ends up serving the captain of the guard for the Pharaoh. And so he's actually a servant in this house. And this guy named Potiphar basically finds out he's really good at everything. He's smart. Everything he does seems to work out and prosper. So he ends up putting him in charge of all the other servants. And then eventually, Potiphar's wife, she starts looking at Joseph and she wants to have sex with him, and he won't. And so she ends up accusing him. Joseph ends up getting thrown into prison, and he's in prison for approximately 11 years. He's a slave and in prison for 11 years. I don't know exactly how long he was in prison for versus how long he was a slave. But while he's in prison, he gets two people come into the prison, and we're going to talk about those in the next video. And he interprets their dreams, and one of them ends up dying, just like the dream told him, and the next one is restored to his position as the cupbearer for the Pharaoh. And then Joseph says, when you get out of here, put a good word in for me and get me out of here. And the cupbearer completely forgets about him, and for 2 years doesn't even think about him. And so Joseph spends the other 2 years in jail. And then eventually Pharaoh has two dreams. They're so disturbing to him, he can't understand them. He tells them to his wise men. His wise men don't understand. They don't understand. They can't interpret the dream. And then the butler, the cupbearer, says, "Wait a minute. I know this guy. I know a guy, and I met him when I was in jail, and he can interpret dreams." So they pull him out. He interprets the dreams. The dreams are about the 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. And so Pharaoh actually puts him in charge of collecting during the times of the 7 years of famine, and then collecting during the 7 years of plenty, and then distributing during the 7 years of famine. And so like you could see throughout Joseph's life, that almost everything just keeps coming back to dreams and understanding the symbolic aspect of dreams. And so I think probably I'm going to start wrapping it up now. There was a point where I started getting dreams, probably in the late 80s, in the early 90s. And at one point, I think it was in the early 90s, I was getting a lot of dreams, and I started realizing like there were little details in my dreams that were showing me things and teaching me things. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. I saw how Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds, and I thought, I'd like that. I mean, that's a pretty ambitious goal, but I would like to be able to understand visions and dreams of all kinds. I mean, if I understood visions, I could probably understand the prophets a lot better in the Old Testament and the book of Revelation. But I wanted to understand my dreams a little. I wanted to understand my dreams better. And so I thought, well, what Joseph says to the butler when he's in prison is, he says, do not interpretations belong to God? And so God can teach us how to interpret the dreams that we get. So I prayed and I said, God, would you just show me how, like, teach me about dreams and teach me so that I can understand them better. And I worked third shift, so I came home and I went to sleep. I slept during the day, and then I got up in the evening. And when I got up, I went downstairs and I turned the TV on and I sat on the couch. And there's a sitcom called Home Improvement. And I started watching, and then it got kind of weird because the whole episode was centered around dreams. And I thought, this is really kind of peculiar. because I had prayed like that morning, teach me about dreams. And so I got to, there's Jill had a dream that she was riding on the back of on a horse with Tarzan on this beach, and she's she's hanging on to him, and he's riding on this big this white horse or whatever, and so she told the dream, and Tim got really jealous. He goes like, why is my wife dreaming about Tarzan? Like, why is she having these dreams about these, another man? And so he's very disturbed about it. And I think there's even other dreams in the episode, and it kind of, I think Allie has a dream or something. Something's going on with that. And so Tim goes out into the backyard, and he goes up to this fence, and then there's Wilson, who lives next door, and Tim says, he goes, my wife had this dream, and it just really upsets me. It's bothering me a lot. And Wilson says, well, Carl Jung, and at the time I knew absolutely nothing about who Carl Jung was. I don't know. If you do know anything about Carl Jung, he's a famous psychologist or psychiatrist, and he did a lot of breakthrough understanding in the field of psychotherapy and the interpretation of dreams. And so what Wilson says to him, he said, well, Jung said that if you want to understand a dream, pay attention to letters and numbers. And so Tim steps back and he starts thinking, and he's like, so Tarzan is T. He starts getting kind of happy. He goes, I'm Tarzan. He goes, I'm the ape man of my wife's dreams. And and I remember thinking to myself, wow, this is really weird that I'm learning about dreams from Tim the Tool Man. And I have no control over what was on TV. I didn't even have a TV guide, so I had no idea that this episode was even going to be on. I just turned on the TV at random. Now, either way, uh, you can kind of see this in Joseph's dreams, that the 11 stars seem to be pretty significant to him, and he has an association with the number 11 because he has 11 brothers. And so um, these are these are all stories in the Bible, and that's just about it for now. And maybe what we want to do is maybe next week we'll go to when he's in prison and he gets the cupbearer's dream and the baker's dream, and how he goes about interpreting them, and we can kind of look at those. And so there's some neat things. And what I would suggest is that I think that Joseph is paying attention to his dreams. Now, what it says that Jacob kept all these things in mind, even though he's like, really, really, you think that you're, you know, like he kind of rebukes him. He doesn't think that this is real. But then it says he kept all these things in mind. And sometimes you get a dream, or you hear somebody else tells you a dream, and you really don't know what it means. And you know what? It's okay to just say, I don't know what that means. And so you can kind of put it on the shelf. Sometimes, and I think this is important, is that sometimes a dream might make sense later when you look back on it, more than in the moment that you're getting it. Like, for instance, I got that dream where the van was smashed into the yellow house 3 times. And, uh, I woke up and I went to work, and then I smashed their van into a yellow trailer. Not 3 times, but one time was enough to almost cost me my job. And then the rest of the dream was showing me how I wasn't going to lose my job. Now, the dream told me you're not going to lose your job. All right, things were really going bad for me at that time. And you know what? I think it was the mercy of God, because he's like, you know what? The last thing John needs right now is to be stressed out for an entire week and worry about whether or not he's going to lose his job. So I'm going to tell him I knew this was going to happen and it's going to work out okay. You're not going to lose your job. And I didn't end up losing my job. And it turned out that there were a whole bunch of little details in the dream that were very accurate. And I was told that by other people when I shared the dream with them. So, but with that, sometimes, you get a dream and you don't really know exactly what it means. That might be why it's kind of important maybe to write it down. Daniel talks about he wrote down the main facts of the dream when he got it, when he got a dream. And sometimes you can go back and those dreams actually make more sense um, as time goes on and you get a different perspective from them. And sometimes the dream is not necessarily like when you look at Joseph's dreams, there was nothing in the dream that told him how that was going to happen or about anything that was going to happen in between the time he got the dream and the time it was actually fulfilled. There was a whole bunch of details that were left out. Like he didn't mention you're going to be a slave. And then you're going to, as if being a slave wasn't any worse. And then you're going to go to prison, right? And then I'm going to work it out so you're raised up and exalted and you're given power and authority and your brothers bow down to you. So, and I would say also, I think it's important sometimes if we do get a dream and if we do think it's from God, I think it probably would be best if we're not trying to make it happen. Um, Sometimes the dream is actually something like you'll see something ahead of time and then it'll kind of duplicate itself and kind of then like what to do because you saw yourself do it in the dream, something like that. But either way, um, I'll just give you another weird thing. My wife, right before COVID happened and the whole lockdowns, the shutdowns, and everything, my wife had a dream, and there was this Chinese guy, and he was selling fruit that looked like a little ball with little spikes on it and little things. And so like she actually, when she wrote the dream out, she actually tried to draw a picture of it, and she's trying to draw a picture of it. It's got little spikes on it. It's all over, and he's selling this fruit. And then the dream switches, and then the next thing she sees is she's walking around, and there's roads that are all blocked. These roads like are blocked off, but there's like nothing going on. There's no reason to block these roads off. And she's like, why are they blocking these roads off? Like, well, at the time she wrote down the dream, didn't really mean anything to her. But after COVID, she went through a book and she's like reading through the dream and she's like, wow, that looks like the COVID virus, that little ball with the spiky things all over it. It's like it looks like the COVID virus and the fact that a Chinese guy was selling it. And I will tell you up front, my wife is not racist against Chinese people or anything. She has no bad feelings towards Chinese people. It was just kind of a weird little detail in the dream. And when it switches, and there's some other stuff, but when it switches and they block off roads, the response to the COVID vaccine was them shutting things down that didn't need to be shut down. At least that was her interpretation of. But she didn't understand it at the time that she got it. And why would God give you a dream like that? Sometimes I think he wants to let you know that you know more because you have the Spirit of God in you than you think you do. And so, and I'll just end with this very last thing is that In Mark chapter 4, verse 33 and 34, and with many such parables he spoke the word to them as they were able to hear it, but without a parable he did not speak to them. And when they were alone, he explained all things to his disciples. Um, and so, if you do get dreams and you do think that they're from God, um, and you don't know what they mean, we're not alone. Jesus said, I'm not going to leave you orphans. I'm going to send to you the Spirit of truth who will guide you into all truth and teach you all things. And another thing it says he would do in John chapter 16, it says he would show you things to come. And so one of the things that the Holy Spirit does in our life is he teaches us and he shows us things to come. That's something that we need to be thankful for and be able to receive and as effectively as we can. Um, and so I just want to say a prayer again, just as we'll look at the baker's dreams, and then we'll also look at the Pharaoh's dreams, and I think that'll be it for this week. But let's just say a prayer right now. Father, I thank you that you've that you speak to us in dreams, that you cause us to see visions, that you speak to us in your word, that you guide us, that we are not alone. And God, I just ask right now in the name of Jesus, give us ears to hear and eyes to see and a heart that's receptive to whatever it is that you're saying to us and leading us and guiding us in. And Lord, I pray that you would give us wisdom to know what to do with the revelation that we're given, and that you would begin to speak to us and pour out your Holy Spirit to teach us, to guide us, and direct us in everything that we do and say. Make us more effective as ministers and as witnesses and messengers of the gospel. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. God bless you. Till next week. Have a good one.